So good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Thursday night Anamkara meditation program. And with all my heart, with all my love, I welcome you to our program this evening. And we're celebrating the 21st anniversary of the start of Anamkara. So October 2001, we began shortly after the terrible tragedy of 9/11, and to help people have free and open access to the most profound practices we can do to take care of ourselves and really to take care of the world. Meditation, to come to know the truth of who we are and live that into the world. And that's what we've been doing for these 21 years, is making programs available. And so, we can think about, how do we celebrate? Well, we celebrate by this. We celebrate through satsang. We celebrate the essence of the truth of who we are, and gathering together to do the practices that allow us to know that directly, experience that directly, and then walk the light and the truth of that into the world. So I want to thank you for coming and bringing the power of your practices, the power of your commitment to practice, and of course, your sublime self, the truth of who you are. That's what this entire program is about, is getting to know that more and more profoundly and deeply, to be immersed in that. That's what each and every one of us is capable of. That's our birthright. So we gather together to do these practices so we come to know that and live from that state. So thank you for coming. So once again, with all my heart and with all my love, I welcome you to our program tonight. And what we've been doing at the start is just taking a few minutes to be able to help calm the mind. Now, the mind is such a busy little instrument, so engaged in so many different things, inside and outside. And so to become fully present, fully here, fully in this moment, we give it some transition time. But there's also a beautiful practice that's based on the power of mantra. And it's a very simple mantra. It's just 2 syllables, ah and hum, ah and hum. And it's said that the breath comes in silently with a silent ah as the breath comes in, and hum as the breath goes out. Breath comes in with an ah, goes out with a sound hum. And that mantra simply means I am. But it's the I am awareness of the boundless I, the infinite I, the I of the divine self within. So when we are sort of attuning our consciousness to that and becoming absorbed in just silently in the mind as the breath comes in, and hum silently in the mind as the breath goes out, we're letting go of the way the mind gets involved in little I awareness, little contracted I awareness. And instead, we're helping it to get attuned to what's already there, the sublime, boundless awareness of I am. As I am the infinite, I am boundless love, I am boundless consciousness, boundless wisdom, boundless peace, boundless rapturous joy. That's the nature of that I. That's what meditation is all about, coming to know that. We already know the little I. We're going to let that go to come to know the magnificence of the divine within. And we're going to do that very simply with the breath and with the harmonium. And so what we're going to start is you exhale, and then on the inhalation, silently you're going to go ah, and then hum silently on the exhalation. Ah, as the breath comes in silently, and hum as the breath silently, just in your mind. And then just continue with that awareness. Aham, I am. As the breath continues, coming in and going out. That background awareness, the infinitude of being, is always present, all times, all places. That is the ground of our existence. That is the ground of even our sense of being a little contracted thing, right? It all rests on that, the divine, the infinite, the one, the truth of who you are. That's what we come back to over and over again. Right? So, last time we got together 3 weeks ago, one of the things I was talking about was, the nature of the mind and a map of being able to look at what's these practices of meditation. How do we shift out of this ordinary awareness that we are so familiar with? As a matter of fact, this is the reality for the ordinary mind. The infinitude is literally unimaginable for the poor mind. Right? So how do we get to there? And there are maps, and maps of sort of the levels of consciousness, maps that help us understand some of the processes involved in meditative practice. We shouldn't confuse the map for the territory. A map is a way of being able to look at and simplify what we're going to be moving through as we do these practices over years, over lifetimes. And so last time we were talking about the map related to 4 states of consciousness: the waking state, the dream state, the deep sleep state, and the 4th state, the state of meditation, the turiya state, right? And it is really the focus of what all yoga practices, Buddhist practices, mystical practices, is to know that state and live from that. A radically different state. As we talked about last time, that state, which is the state of profound meditation, is a continuous state. The other states are intermittent, and they're exclusive. If you're in the waking state, you're not in the dream state. If you're in the dream state, you're not in the deep sleep state or the waking state. They're discontinuous. Meditation is a state that transcends and subsumes them all, permeates them all. So you can be awake to meditative consciousness, unity consciousness, even in the midst of waking state activity, even in the midst of dream states, even in the midst of the deep sleep state. So it's a map for helping us understand. And then we understand from that the state of meditation is not produced by the practices of meditation. The mind does its practices in order to be able to access what's already there. Whether that's mindfulness, whether that's breath work, whether that's asana, pranayama, pratyahara, whatever those things are, they're helping to get the ordinary mind out of the way so we can see what's already present. So it's important to know that, because the mind can think, it does meditation. No, it does practices. And the practices are really valuable for the mind and body. They're not going to change who you are. They don't change the truth of who you are. They don't make you more divine. You couldn't be more divine than you are right here, right now. Your divinity permeates everything about who you are. Meditation allows us to know that, to live that experience, to feel that, with the same certainty that we feel like we're identified when we're identified with body and mind. So it's this radical shift that then allows us all to see that there's meditation as practice. Those are the different things. Mantra, breath, practices. There's meditation as a process, a transformative process that changes mind and body over time as they become more refined and more attuned to the truth of who you are. Those transformative aspects of meditation are really what then, especially the ones that can be measured, are what forms the basis of the scientific research on meditation that shows so many physical and psychological and even brain functioning benefits of meditation. Those are all the measurable outcomes. They're not the state of meditation. Right? They're great for the mind, they're great for the body. The state of your infinite self is never altered. It's never improved, It doesn't need any improvement. The infinite can't become more infinite, because the infinite is everything. So meditation practices and transformational processes are all aimed at body and mind. So that helps us to understand then, what are we doing when we're doing these kinds of practices, mantra, contemplation practices, these kinds of things? Well, they're helping to transform the mind and body as instruments for being able to bring that high level of consciousness into the world, but also transform so they can be attuned to that. Right now, they're attuned to the gross awareness of just the ordinary waking state. And so much is missed by a mind that solely dwells in that. So it's transformed by these practices. Now, another map that goes along with the four states is the four bodies, right? And again, this is a map. This is a scheme of being able to sort of differentiate these things. So we don't want to take it too concretely or literally, but in the yogic tradition, we can talk about as a way of understanding. In a sense, it's a teaching technique. It's a pedagogical framework for understanding what's going on. And so when we talk about the four states, well, there's with the waking state goes the physical body. The waking state is dominated by physical body awareness, right? And both in terms of our senses, but also in terms of what are we identified with? The gender of the body, the roles it's in, the relationships it's in, the things it does in the world. Right? That forms the basis of our limited identification around being identified with the body and mind in the waking state. Then, when we go into the dream state, now we can start to begin to talk more about what the yogis would talk about as the subtle body. Subtle body is really the mental body, right? It's not a body at all. So we don't want to get concrete about it, but in the same way that we might talk about a body of knowledge, right? If you study musicology, if you study music, you're studying about the body of knowledge around music. Psychology, the body of knowledge around how the psyche, the mind, the body, everything works. So it's a body, not in a physical sense, but in a way of sort of aggregating the experience of mind and calling it a body. Right? So subtle body in the waking state is really intimately connected with the physical body. So we experience it typically more purely in dream states, because now we're not aware of the physical body. We're more aware of just the subtle body. So thoughts, feelings, dreams, we're not limited in the way the physical body is. So in dream state, you can fly, you can move back and forth in time. These are all things that the mind, as the subtle body, can do unencumbered by the physical body. Now, from a meditative point of view, these are just still limited domains of consciousness. Nothing special about them. They're just the unfolding of the contracted nature of consciousness associated with mind and body. When we move to the causal state and the causal body, the deep sleep state is what's associated with that. So in the deep sleep state, we would talk about that as the continuous awareness of nothingness. It's just, the world went black for a while. It was just this, it was a thread of subtle, unconscious I awareness. We didn't feel like we died and got reborn after deep sleep. And it disappear. There's this little thread. But for the most part, it's just the awareness of nothingness. And when you enter that at times, when the Shakti brings you, Shakti Kundalini is the motive power underlying all of this creation and underlying the processes of meditation. So when that draws you into a conscious witness state, a meditative state where you can see the subtle body and dreams, you can see that causal state of just the awareness of nothingness, it's illumined by consciousness itself. That consciousness is Kundalini Shakti, blazing all times, all places. So then, moving from the causal body, now above that is what's called the supracausal, and it's not a body at all. The supracausal is the infinite one, the boundless, inconceivable, inexpressible, unimaginable, beyond all thoughts and forms. So that is where it all begins. And so we can see that to go from that state of the infinitude of being, in order to know what it is to be this differentiated waking state, the consciousness has to go through an involutionary kind of process. I wrote about this in The Soul's Journey, and there's a map in there talking about that. Involution is the sort of descent of consciousness from infinite, boundless nature, still maintaining that, but taking on a piece that begins to form. The first thing it takes is that nothingness. Why? Because in order to know what it is to be finite, we have to negate the infinitude of being. In that in-between liminal space between having been the infinite luminous one, all-encompassing everything, on its way to wanting to know what it is to be finite, it has to go, okay, I'm going to forget about that. And now it's just darkness. There's nothing. Nothing. It's all gone. Causal body. Continuous awareness of nothingness. That's that. The only thing, in a sense, that's present is the will of the infinite to become, to desire, to know. That's there as that thread that is then going to create the next state and the next body, the subtle body, the mind, and the state, dream state that goes with that. That's a further contraction of consciousness, but it's also now it's differentiating into the many forms. It went from the formless unity consciousness to now it's starting to see its creation as form. There's I am and there's that. And that is all these things. And then it's going to become identified with some of that and pieces of that and say, oh, but I'm not that. I'm only this, but I'm not that. That's all what's now beginning to unfold. So you can see this is a map for being able to understand stages of consciousness and how this illumines what's going on in the process of meditation. It further contracts into the waking state. Now that the forms become well differentiated, they're not even held in a dream state. All that we see is still within ourselves. All that's there is still the images, the forms, dancing as our own energy within ourselves. With waking state now appears a separate world, all these others. So now the divine has the play of this magnificent field that is created to unfold its infinitude of forms in. So that's what's happening in the waking state. So you can see this contraction of consciousness is all brought about by the infinite itself. That's why I say Kundalini Shakti is what creates all of that. There's a much more complex and highly symbolic map of the chakras that divides that whole process into 6 or 7 steps. Right? But we can understand that these are just ways of being able to help the poor mind understand. Because the poor mind is still driven by its grasping nature. It wants to grasp this. So we have these concepts, but don't get attached to them. They're all going to disappear. When we go back into the infinite, the one, none of this is there. Beings have attained union with the infinite, with the divine, from many different traditions that never spoke about different states, different waking bodies, sleeping bodies, chakras, anything. These are not necessary pieces of information for merging with the one, the truth of who you are. They just help the mind have some inkling of what's going on here, And when the mind has a little knowledge, sometimes it calms it down. Sometimes it thinks it's going to do something with all that stuff, and that's not a good thing. We don't want it doing much. Just sit. The Shakti is going to take care of all this. Because who created it all? That was the infinite. That was Shakti herself. Right? So it's that power, which was the esoteric goal, the awakening of that consciousness, is the esoteric goal Hatha Yoga, Mantra Yoga, Laya Yoga, Raja, all classic yogas, saw that, they were all sort of precursors to that awakening, because who created the bondage? Who created the false identification? Shakti. The mind can't undo that. The mind is the one caught and bound. Right? So it has a very limited range of what it can do to help ameliorate the situation. So we give it a little bit of information, and then we keep turning it over to the grace of the infinite, that divine will, right? That Icha Shakti that wanted to create differentiation and become involved in it, identified with it, explore it. At some point, it goes, okay, we're done with this drama. Time to go back. And now we're reversing the process. Now we can see that to go from the waking state in identification with all the things that were identified in the waking state, we have to let go and let go. Just to do that at night, to fall asleep, you have to let go of everything. Pull the covers up, let go of everything. If you don't, you have insomnia. So we let go to go into the more expanded state of dreams. But it's still contracted. It's still a limited eye awareness in there. And the fact is, there's another sort of letting go that happens unconsciously in sleep, where we then go into a different state of the deep sleep state. And we can see that there are changes in EEG patterns that go with this. The waking state has a much faster, more engaged kind of brainwave activity going on. As you start to go into the dream states, you start to slow it down. It goes down into like 4 to 8 cycles per second, whereas before it was 15 to 22, 30 cycles per second, humming along in the waking state. Dream state slows it down. Now if we're going to go into the deep sleep state, now that's delta in terms of brainwave patterns. It's like 0 to 4 hertz. Very slow pattern, right? So there are these shifts that are going on physiologically with these states. There are shifts that are going on with our consciousness. But we also want to see there are shifts going on in terms of the consciousness beyond the ordinary mind that's drawing us, right? And saying, yeah, let go of all the things you're identified with in the waking state. Let go of everything you're identified with even in dream states. Let go even of everything that was going to spring out of the causal body, the causal state. So named because it causes the subtle and waking state realms. We want to let go of that as well. And in a sense, at that point, that same Shakti, that will to know what it was to be finite, limited, multifaceted, has turned. And now that inner power of the divine will is saying, I just want to know. I just want to know the infinite. I just want to know the divine. And it's drawing our awareness to break through, to cut through, to let go and let go and let go in the most profound ways. That's all the work of Shakti Kundalini. She creates all of this, sustains it, plays with it, and then finally in the evolution of consciousness begins dissolving it. That's why it's peculiar to think that there are people who have talked about wrong rising and deflected rising, all these different things about Kundalini. She's the one who has created and become it all. She knows exactly what to do. The ancient path of Kundalini yoga, the yoga that unfolds with Kundalini awakening, relied on the profound transcendent wisdom of Shakti Kundalini herself to produce the movements in body and mind called kriyas, to purify, to open, to differentiate our ordinary consciousness from the infinitude so that we can reclaim the infinite as our own being. And that's what we do with the practices, right? And just as we can see that in terms of these states and in terms of these associated ideas of bodies, physical body, subtle body, causal body, supercausal body. Well, those four, there are also 4 states of language that go along with the 4 states of consciousness, the 4 bodies, 4 levels of the power of language, right? Paravak, the power of sound on its highest level. Para means beyond, totally beyond. That's the infinite one. That's you as Shiva, Shakti. That's beyond anything. Those words have no meaning. Brahman, no meaning. Nothing. It's beyond all of that. That's that level of the infinitude of being, out of which all of this comes. And one of the ways it manifests is through the power of vibration. That's the principal way. Everything is vibrating. Right? And so the ancient yogis saw that, language, speech comes from there. And when we talk about mantra purely comes from there. The language of the ordinary mind is subtle body and physical body, those realms. Right? That's as far as they go. That's why the kind of language that philosophies, religions, knowledge can be encoded in that kind of language still always remains within the limited domain of mind. Right? To go beyond that domain, we have to go into a vehicle that goes beyond that. Ordinary words, speech, language, ideas don't. Mantra does, because it arises from beyond that, and then if we enter the vehicle of mantra, we become absorbed in it. So for instance, the aham, I am. As we become aware and absorbed more and more in that, then what's going to happen is we can literally begin to experience the 4 levels of speech, of sound, creating experience. It starts out with the vocal aham, concrete, gross level of speech and thought. It's a waking state reality. That's the physical body. We can move it into the subtle body even while being awake, and now we're just repeating ah and the hum silently in the mind. Ah and the hum. The awareness of I am. Right? And so now it's becoming more subtle. Certain boundaries can start to dissolve. Now it's more like I am consciousness. I am awareness. Not just the body. And the awareness that illuminates the experience of body. I am. Right? So now it's becoming more and more subtle. It's going to get to a place where it becomes so subtle, it lets go of its own form. Mantra sheds the form of aham and just becomes a throb of the awareness. I am. No words, just the awareness. I am throbbing, pulsing. I am. Now we've entered the causal body, right? And now we're becoming absorbed in now the will of the infinite to merge in itself again, right? So now that will is moving towards dissolution, not involution and becoming form. It's dissolving form, right? So now we're going to move into that. And these different levels of the power of speech and sound and vibration and conscious, they too have their terms for it. The gross level of speech and language called Vaikari. The subtle body level is called Madhyama. The causal level, Pashyanti. And then beyond that is the para, the infinite. Gate, paragate, parasamgate, bori, swaha. Gone. That's what we're invited to. That's where we go. That's what this is all about. That's what all yoga is about. It's the infinite. Saying, I've had enough, I know this, I'll keep knowing this. It's not going to disappear, the differentiated world, the conventional self, the conventional mind and body. We'll still carry on our roles as, sons and daughters, husbands and wives, working in the world, doing our dharma. But we're going to add to it the infinitude of being, the boundlessness of that the boundlessness of the wisdom, the compassion, the love, the peace, the joy that goes with that. Unconditioned, not caused. Remember, we've gone beyond all causes. In that state, these are the absolute qualities, the foundational qualities, the irreducible qualities of consciousness itself. So they're not caused. It's not the mind knows happiness because it says, oh, I got something satisfied, something was nice, I feel a little happy. That's ephemeral, that's caused. This is beyond all of that. That's what we're coming home to. I am. That's the I am. I am. I am the infinite. I am the one. I am all there is. Everything, everyone, all that. That's all there is. So that's how these maps begin to hint for the poor mind where it's going, and to hint at the reverence and the awe it can have in approaching this. This is not mundane. This isn't just some other things to study and knowledge to know about. This is the infinite. This is the divine as everything, everyone, all the time, in all places. Know that. Know that. Walk that into the world. Live that moment by moment. That's our birthright, to know that. That's what Kundalini Shakti, as a map and a description of that process, is all about. Is to come home to the truth of who we are and live it into the world with the boundless love, compassion, wisdom, and kindness, patience. That's truly who we are, and can then inform the poor mind with those. The poor mind would like to be more patient, would like to be more kind, would like to be more loving. It has a hard time generating that. The divine is saying, come. Rest in my embrace. You'll know that. Rest in this. The divine says, I'll always infuse you with that. That's what we're invited to. So we turn our attention away from the things we identify in the waking state, the dream state, even the deep sleep state, to come to know the infinitude of being. And so that's one of the fundamental components then of when we're doing mantra. So now we're going to be chanting the great mantra, Om Kalima, Om Kalima, Kali Durga, Namo Nama, Om Kalima, Om. That's a throb of the infinite. No name, form, anything. That's just the pure, raw throb of consciousness that becomes all that is. All mantras arise out of Om. Shakti created that as the foundation. Then the different letters of the Sanskrit alphabet and the different components of mantra arise out of Om. So we have Kali Ma, the great goddess, meaning it's really a way of understanding that consciousness that gives birth to everything, holds everything, sustains everything, and then embraces it and merges it back into itself. That's the great mother. Om Kali Ma. Kali Durga. Durga is another name for Kali. Maha Devi, the great goddess, creates and sustains all, liberates all. Om Kali Ma. Kali Durga. Namo Nama. I bow to you. So that's a hint for the mind. How do you come into right relationship with your divine, sublime, rapturous, beautiful self? You bow with reverence. You surrender. That's what we do. That's the surrender in meditation. We have to surrender thinking I'm one thing or another and allow ourselves to come to rest in the presence of that one, as our own self. That's what we'll do now as we chant this together. We'll chant for a few minutes and then sit in just the stillness, the silence of meditation. At the end, we'll ring a gong. We'll chant a few rounds to come out of meditation. And then we'll wrap up to the evening. So here we begin. Om Kali Ma. Om Kali Ma. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Om Kali Ma. Om Kali Ma. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Om Kali Ma. Om Kali Ma. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Om Kali Ma. Om Kali Ma. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Om Kali Ma. Om Kali Ma. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Om Kali Ma. Om Kali Ma. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Om Kali Ma. Om Kali Ma. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Om Kali Ma. Om Kali Ma. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Om Kali Ma. Om Kali Ma. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Om Kali Ma. Om Kali Ma. Kali Kali Durga Namo resting in the awareness underlies all mantra, all practice. I am. I'm the infinite. I'm Kali, Shiva, Durga, all that is. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Om Kali Ma. Om Kali Ma. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Om Kali Ma. Om Kali Ma. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Kali Durga Namo Namah. So we end with this prayer, and may all our practices truly benefit everyone, and may all beings know complete freedom from suffering. Namaste. Aham. I am. It's all there is. It's the substratum of existence. When we come to know that, then the mind can find a place to be at ease. That's the solid ground of being. The mind's identifications are all ephemeral and coming and going, good and bad, and this and that. It's always worried, always fearful, always looking for more or less. Come to rest in being, the fullness of being. In that, there's the fullness of wisdom, fullness of compassion, fullness of love, fullness of rapture. Know that. Even while knowing the ordinary mind and its world. And then we can walk that greater wisdom, love, compassion, presence into the world, into everything we do, and see it in all that we encounter. That's the transformation, that the power of grace. Kundalini Shakti is known as the grace-bestowing power of the infinite. Bestows the grace of that vision, that living vision of knowing moment by moment the truth of who we are and the truth of what all beings and all creation is. So keep coming home to that. So I want to thank you all for coming and bringing the power of your practices and the power of your commitment to practices and your divine self. Bring that into the world, walking that in moment by moment, day by day, in whatever ways you do. The world is in desperate need of ones who embody that. So thank you for being those who do. And then I look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks.